right.
Hello.
Hey, Hope.
Hello, Governor. How are you?
I'm so blessed. I'm so happy to see you. How you
Happy
doing?
to see you as well. Happy to see you as well. Happy to be here. Happy that all this is happening, and it's a great day for Democrats, I think.
It sure is. I'm telling you, it's a great day for truth and hope and vision and for people to actually get excited about what the
Yes.
future is going to pull together. Because I just feel like for so long, we weren't able to have an honest conversation about what's at stake.
Right.
And we weren't able to have an honest conversation about why the people who sit in these seats, why it
Right.
matters that we have people that are actually willing to advocate. We have people that are willing to push. We have people that are willing to have a bigger vision. Have people that are actually being able to build out a tent that's going to be big enough for all of us.
Right.
And so it is this is a good time right now.
Totally. Totally. I'm so excited. Everyone's starting to roll in. And if for those of you that don't know me, my name is Hope Wiseman. I'm the founder and CEO of Marion, Maine. We are one of the only Black-owned dispensaries in the state of Maryland,
Say it
and
again.
we are family-owned, we are woman-owned, and we're doing well. And we're so excited, and a lot of that has to do with all of the work that the state has done to make sure that Black entrepreneurs have a space in this industry. So thank you for that. But that's not what we came here to talk about first. First, I want to talk about this historic. Well, go
I
ahead.
was going to
Go
say
ahead. What do you want to say?
before we even get into the part, I have to tell everybody who's out here listening that I had a chance to first meet Hope. What, 2.5, 3 years ago now?
Yeah.
Longer than
Yeah.
that.
A while ago
But
now.
I learned about her business. I learned about what she was building, and I walked away inspired.
Thank you.
Because I walked away inspired because she's not just a trailblazer inside the industry. She's someone who's helping to literally blaze trails and open up doors for everyone else. Because when I was having conversations with Hope about the industry, conversations about what this could be, conversations about how are we thinking about having an equitable industry. And so just as a backdrop for the state, for people who might not know, we've had a medical cannabis industry for years in the state of Maryland, but it was not a recreational.
Mm-hmm.
Then eventually it went to the ballot. So it went to referendum. And by a 70% margin, the people of the state voted to not just have a medical, but also to have a recreational cannabis industry. But part of the thing we knew going in was that this had to be a cannabis rollout that was going to be safe, that was going to be equitable, and that was going to be fair. Mm-hmm. And you had industry partners who were already inside doing this work. You had people who were already building out really core platforms and doing it in a way where they were just opening up doors and blazing trails for everybody. And that was you, Hope. And so when this idea of how to build this out in a way that is equitable, in a way that is fair, in a way that sees everybody, and in a way that makes sure that we're opening up pathways for everybody, it was just very obvious that you had to be one of the core partners we want to work with, because you weren't new to this, and you had a basic thesis and approach that you had always taken up to the work. And so when I say, sincerely, like, big up, and we just wouldn't be here if it weren't for the work that you were doing. I mean that with everything in me.
Yes, yes. Shout out to all the other stakeholders. There were so many people that played a role in the legislation that passed, which I believe is one of the most progressive and inclusive and equitable pieces of cannabis legislation that we have in the country.
Right.
So hopefully it helps to shape what we do federally, some years down the line, for sure. And really, we've seen that the state has been doing extremely well since you came into office, and employment is up. Everything is well. How does cannabis kind of fit into that story? Because we've seen that the industry has been thriving as well.
It's true. I mean, and we said that we wanted to make sure that this was going to be a thriving industry. And, we just announced that that now for the first year that Maryland has over $1.1 billion in cannabis sales, and also 174 new social equity licenses.
Yes.
So able to show that you could have a growing industry and also make sure that industry is diverse. Make sure that industry is actually representative of the communities, representative of the cultures, representative of everything we have and that we need to get done. But, where cannabis also plays into this is, I've been very focused on, we've got to get our economy going. We've got to make sure that we can have pathways for people to be able to enter into the economy. And our focus is work, wages, and wealth, right? And then all three have to be a part of it. So when we started having this, the recreational cannabis industry, and we've been really proud of the results we've seen so far, the problem is that we still have people who, while we have now a new billion-dollar industry, who couldn't get a barber's license, who couldn't get a student loan because of a cannabis conviction. And we're talking a misdemeanor cannabis conviction or a paraphernalia cannabis conviction. And so we knew that, coming on board and saying, like, we cannot celebrate the benefits of legalization if you do not address the consequences of criminalization. And to be able to work with you, Hope, to be able to work with impacted citizens, to be able to work with organizations, to be able to work with law enforcement, to be able to work with both state's attorneys and also public defenders, to be able to bring everybody around the table and say, we have got to address this because we cannot have people who continually are being punished for something that is no longer illegal in our state. And the work that we've been able to do to be able to make this happen, where to your point, just weeks ago, I signed the largest mass pardon in the history of the United States for misdemeanor cannabis convictions. But that would not have happened had it not been for your work, for the work of impacted citizens, for the people who now said it's time for Maryland to lead in a unique way. And if we're really talking about having an inclusive economy, you better make sure that it's actually an inclusive economy. And so I'm proud that Maryland's leading that way.
That's really, really amazing that you include the criminal justice reform into how our economy works. A lot of people complained that when we were creating the legalization bill that we were kind of leaving that piece out. And the argument was always, no, we're going to get to it. So it's your office that got to it first. Can you explain to people what a pardon is and what it isn't? Because a lot of people don't quite understand, or they may think, oh, does this mean, they're releasing 175,000 people from prison? Like, what does this mean?
Yeah. So basically what a pardon is, a pardon is something that just constitutionally, there's only, a few dozens of people that have the authority to do a pardon inside the country. And on state levels, there's one person. It exclusively falls in the power of the governor. And I know is not just a person who had never run for office before coming on board, and also just the first African American governor in the history of my state, only the third in the history of the United States ever elected. You come to understand the power of the pardon and what that means, because essentially what a pardon is, it's essentially taking away a measure of guilt from a form of conviction. Here's why that becomes important, is you saw with the 175,000 pardons of convictions, of misdemeanor cannabis convictions that we signed, it essentially took away that measurement of guilt for it. So in addition to the pardon, for about 40 to 50,000 people, their record was now also cleaned, because the thing that they were charged with and convicted from is now clean from a record, so they essentially received automatic expungements as well. And so what's now happening is, once a person has a pardon that, again, only the governor can give, then they can go through an expungement process of them having a record completely clean. Because generally the way it works for expungements is a sentence has to be served on that. But with a pardon, once they now are saying essentially you're free of guilt, they can then go through that process. But it was also very important for me about how we knew that the largest mass pardon in U.S. history was just the first step. We've had a real problem in this country in the way that cannabis has been used as a cudgel inside of communities, and specifically in Black communities, communities of color, and low-income communities. Because let's be clear, during this entire time when cannabis was illegal, three times more likely to be convicted and arrested for that crime if you were Black in the state of Maryland. So there have been racial and there have been economic undertones throughout this entire war on cannabis that has existed. And so we knew we then had to go out and be able to really push differently on the different ways that we could actually move those levers, be able to address that and make sure that every sentence can't be a life sentence.
Right.
Because that's the way we have treated the criminal justice system before, that every sentence becomes a life sentence. So this was the way that that we just said we're going to move aggressively to be able to address this.
You know, I feel like the cannabis industry has almost been like a beacon of hope, where the rest of the country and many other industries have been abandoning equity efforts. So, you know, I think it's been really exciting that now we're tackling from the economic and business side, but also from the criminal justice reform side. And I think that that's really awesome. When you say that this is just the first step, what does that mean for the state? What does that mean for the future of the industry, in your opinion, but more so for the state?
Well, I think what it means is that we have got to offer new avenues for people to be able to enter into the industry. And so, you know, there were limitations, for example, for people to be able to enter into the industry if you have a cannabis conviction, their ability to not be able to enter the cannabis industry. So the way it works, and still many other places around the country, is if a person has a conviction for assault with a deadly weapon, they can enter into the cannabis industry. But if you have a cannabis conviction, you could not. So you had a whole bunch of these arbitrary rules that sat on board that A, did not make sense, and then B, were intentionally discriminatory. And so really what this allows us to do now is to take a step back and to say, if we are going to, if 70% of the people of this state have indicated that we want a recreational cannabis market in the state of Maryland, that we don't just have an obligation to be able to fulfill the recreational cannabis market, but that you have to be able to deal with the criminal justice consequences at the same time. It cannot be something where you're picking and choosing which one you're going to deal with, or we're going to deal with this later on. Because the problem is oftentimes dealing with it later on means it never gets dealt with.
Yes.
And so we decided that we could actually do it both ways. And a big piece of this has got to be getting people back into an opportunity of employment. You know, we've made historic investments in our administration in childcare, for example, because one of the biggest prohibitors of people being able to enter back into a workforce, particularly women, was the cost of childcare. And so we've got to make this, we're making these historic investments in childcare to get people back into the workforce. We said that one of the biggest challenges we had when it came to employment was housing, and this rapid cost of housing. The fact that you have individuals where you have individuals who are paying 40 and 50% of their monthly take home, that's just simply going towards rent and shelter. So we passed the most aggressive housing package in the history of the state of Maryland, because if you really want to focus on work, wages, and wealth, it means being able to get people more opportunities to become owners. And that first starts off with housing and addressing things like historically unfair appraisal values in historically redlined neighborhoods, adding increased liquidity for first-time home buyers. And so you're talking about housing, you're talking about childcare, but also it means we're removing the arbitrary barriers that exist. And when you thought about things like cannabis and cannabis convictions, particularly misdemeanor cannabis convictions, were keeping people from being employed. I think about this one brother named Shiloh, who was actually with us that day when we signed that pardon, one of the people that received the pardon. And he was actively out there. He had a misdemeanor cannabis conviction, the only thing that was on his record, and repeatedly was finding doors being shut on him. He had one job where he was fired on the second day of the job because he couldn't pass his background check because of a cannabis conviction. It's crazy what we were continuing to do to people. And I remember Shiloh that day, you know, when after I signed his pardon, and you know, he was asking questions. He said, "What else do I have to do?" He said, "I said nothing. The pardon's done." I said, "It's right here. That signature. It's over." And Shiloh was like, you know, literally sitting there like, "I feel like I have my life back." It was so fundamentally unfair what was happening to Shiloh and to so many other people like him. And so we've got to get this economy moving, which means you have to get more people involved in the economy. And that means things like make sure you're raising wages, make sure you're focusing on housing reform, make sure you're focusing on childcare, and make sure you're reducing the arbitrary barriers that continue to keep people from being employed, like things like these cannabis convictions.
100%, totally. And now that you've created more opportunity even to get into the ownership side of the space, As you said, we had 175 licenses, 174 licenses issued that were exclusively social equity. 55% of those licenses were to Black entrepreneurs specifically too. Something else that a lot of people might not know, last year, was it last year or maybe the year before? I believe it was last year when we legalized cannabis, the state allocated $40 million to a business assistance fund
That's
to
right.
assist licensees, especially those that fit a social equity status, to get up and running. So this is huge. The state is putting their money where their mouth is. Also, funds from operating businesses like mine are supporting this fund. So it's super exciting. I'm really, really excited to see some of these businesses come on board. What are there any other plans to help assist these entrepreneurs as they go through the process?
Yeah.
Because they still have a long way to go.
They have a long way to go. And first, I have to tell you, the courageousness of our entrepreneurs, the people who are out there taking these risks, and especially, you know, in a market. And again, it's not lost on me that what we're doing in the state of Maryland is important. What we're doing in the state of Maryland is revolutionary.
Yes.
I know that there are parts of this country that are behind us, and on federal law,
Yes.
that there are still challenges within federal law. And so one thing that I know that we will continue to do, and I know a lot of our partners will continue to do, is there has to be, and we are going to continue advocating for changes within the federal system.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the Biden-Harris actually made a major move on being able to reschedule cannabis.
Right.
Rescheduling cannabis, going from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, because what people might not know is the way it was being looked at federally was you had cannabis, which was on the same federal schedule as heroin.
Right.
Which makes absolutely no sense.
No sense at all.
That you had cannabis that was on the same schedule as heroin. It was the Biden-Harris administration that actually changed that. Right. And so there is movement and there's momentum that's happening, but we have to make sure we're continuing to advocate for a sane and a standard federal policy in the way that we're addressing these issues. The other thing that we have to be able to do is, we know that we were able to make adjustments when it came to the pardon, and that's where a governor can go with a pardon. But frankly, there needs to be more done when it comes to this avenue of expungements, and that's where the legislature and everyone else comes into this as well. And there's got to be more that needs to be done when it comes to economic growth and opportunity. Because the one thing that we'll see too is there's a difference between early stage rounds for businesses to be able to enter in. Right. And then go into your Series A, Series B, Series C rounds, especially when you go into increased capital, you now have profitable businesses. What are we doing to make sure that we're fostering a greater sense of connectivity and also recruiting and retaining our industry to be able to be here? And so that's something where we know that having initial capital to get an idea going is important, because, especially when people talk about the friends and family round, the difference is not everybody has the same friends, and not everybody has the same family. So you cannot have new industries that are actually increasing a wealth gap. Yet at the same time, we need to make sure that we have a larger bill, so when this growth happens within the industry, that you have a greater level of participation that can then exist within the industry. But I'll say this, and again, the people who sit in these seats, it matters. Right. It matters who's advocating. It matters who's making the decisions. It matters what their ideology is. It matters how they're thinking about the world and how they view the world. And so as we are talking about what are the things that we can do to be involved and engaged, I want people to learn more about the industry. I want people to learn more about the things that are happening here. I want people to learn more about you, Hope. I want people to know about the amazing entrepreneurs that we have here and the people who are being bold. But as I believe, fortune favors the bold. Yes. But I also want people to know that who you are electing, who you are advocating for, who you are campaigning for, who you're doing this work on behalf of, or who is benefiting from you just sitting on your hands, it matters. Because
even at the local level. Even at the local level. Especially at the local level.
That's right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. That's right.
Prince George's County just had a special election. I want to say the last day to vote was yesterday.
That's right.
And it's very, very important. Prince George's County has been very controversial when it comes to zoning around cannabis dispensaries. And a lot of people will say, like, why would they do that? And I'm like, are you showing up? Are you talking when, I mean, they have bill hearings, they have town hall hearings where it's an even more appropriate place to
That's right.
speak your mind and be heard. So, I think that that's something that people need to understand, that your vote matters, who's representing you matters, and they have you have a moral duty to represent the people and what they want, not necessarily your wants and needs individually. And I don't think people really get that. I think sometimes they're like, oh, well, they're going to do what they want to do. It's like,
Right.
no, what they want to do is what you want.
That's
So
right.
you have to be heard.
Listen, bad things happen in the darkness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The whole point about these elections is you have to bring light
Yes.
to these issues. You have, no pun intended, but like, you got to bring hope.
Yes.
Like, real talk, because bad things happen in the darkness.
Yes.
And so we cannot allow just a small percentage of a population that can then determine all of our futures and the futures of our families, because we chose to sit it out.
Right.
These issues are too important.
Totally. What do you look forward to, or what are you most excited about when it comes to legalization on the federal level even? I really do believe that Maryland, they're going to start tapping us when it's time to have the real conversation, because I believe that our bill really is the most equitable, and our state is thriving.
Right.
We are doing well. Not every state can say that their cannabis program is succeeding. We are one of very few. So what are you excited about on the federal level? What do you see coming in the future potentially, as well?
I'm excited about the fact that our data speaks for itself.
Yes.
I tell people, when we talk about the cannabis industry in our state, this is not an emotive splurge. This is not this is, we're the best just because. Like, no, actually look at the data.
Yes.
Look at the data of what's happening, where Maryland showed you can have a transparent rollout, you can have a safe rollout, and you can have a rollout that focuses on equity and know that you don't have to compromise on those individual things. And so I think the data is really showing that Maryland is not just helping to lead the way when it comes to our state, but it's really showing the country what's possible and what can be done. And so I do think that we will continue having more individual states that will go through this process. I think we're now to 38 states that have some form of either decriminalization or full legalization that they have on board. And I do think, though, that this is going to be an issue where eventually you will have this tipping point of states that the feds will have no choice but to move and to act on it. Especially when you consider other nations that have already started going through this process and have already tried to figure out, okay, how can we make sure that we can have a safe industry? How can we make sure that we can, eliminate a black market industry, but also have something that people are going to be able to have a long-term societal benefit from having a more inclusive economy on board. And so I do believe that this conversation on the federal side, it's going to be coming, but I also believe that the federal side is going to come because the states are going to push it. The states are going to be the one to say, listen, we're showing you how to do this work.
Right.
We're showing you how to do this. And we're showing you how to do it smartly, safely, wisely, equitably. And now we can be the architects. We can make sure that it's our hands on the pen as the feds are then going back and doing their work as well.
Totally. And for those that don't know, federally, some of the topics that have come up, like the governor mentioned, we have rescheduling that's currently being discussed, and it's looking likely, but has not happened yet. So we are going to monitor that closely. This will mean that cannabis is now considered of more medical efficacy and has a lesser chance of addiction than it is currently considered. It will also mean that cannabis will no longer be subject to 280E, which is a tax regulation. That means that Scheduled 1 and 2 controlled substances cannot deduct business expenses, normal business expenses like rent or wages or your marketing expense or anything of the sort. So that means I have to pay taxes on every dollar that I make, even if I spend it all on my business. So that is something that's not fair. We can't wait for that to change. But besides that, some of the other federal topics that we've been talking about, banking access. So banking has been kind of an up and down issue because of its federal status, and we want to get that cleared up. We have banking access, but we pay exorbitant fees. It's really it's just a difficult place to navigate. So definitely banking access is important.
And Hope,
Also, we've talked about the States
can
Act
you can you
as well. Go ahead.
can you talk about that, because that is a component that I think sometimes people miss
Yeah,
when it comes to access, and why it's so difficult for banks to be able to get access to capital to entrepreneurs when you have
totally.
rules between different states and the feds. Can you, because I do think that's a really important point that I want to make sure that everybody really understands the significance of that.
100%. Yeah. So people think, people are always like, you're doing really well. You should be able to go to the SBA and get a loan or just a traditional loan. Even getting loans for real estate sometimes can be difficult. And this is because at the end of the day, like we said, cannabis is still a controlled substance. It's a Schedule I controlled substance as of now. Most banks are federally insured, right? So this means that they could potentially lose that status if they are doing business with a federally illegal business. This is why also it's been difficult traditionally for cannabis companies to find properties, because if the landlord has a note or a mortgage from a bank that's FDIC insured, then their note is in jeopardy of being called by the bank. And, this is not something that most landlords are going to risk. And if they do risk it, they're going to jack up the rent 3 to 4 times. And sometimes they do that anyway, just because they know the difficulty of you getting a property. And all of these things were much, much, much worse years ago. I started in this industry almost 10 years ago pursuing it. And I opened my business in 2018, and it was definitely much more difficult then. It's still difficult now because the barriers are still in place. I think people are just more risk adverse to it at this point. So, yeah, I think banking access now, we bank with state insured banks, and, credit unions, and all of these banks charge fees because they are essentially, doing reports and having extra compliance with our accounts. And sometimes we have restrictions to our accounts, can't necessarily move money the same way that a typical business would. So it does add that extra layer. These are the things that make, our business, which is super highly regulated, very difficult and sophisticated to run.
That's right. And that's why I think it does become so important that there's a whole lot that can be done on the state side. There's a whole lot that our individual states can do.
Yes.
But one of the really important things that has to be done with all of us on the state side as well is you have to make sure that the federal conversation is getting pushed as well.
Yes.
What I love that you broke this down, Hope, because it's just really important for people to understand, like, this is real. And
Yes. Mm-hmm.
for our entrepreneurs who are out there taking real risk with real capital, with real potential opportunity cost, and doing something in a way that we are being very intentional about saying we cannot continue having new industries, that as you have industries grow, you have a wealth gap also grow. We're not going to do that. Not here, not in our state, not in this
Yeah.
time. However, you then have to simplify a process
Mm-hmm.
for people to be able to enter into an industry and grow and be able to build. And so that's why, again, your work is so crucial to us, Hope.
Thank you.
Your 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 leadership is so crucial to
Thank
us.
you.
Having our entrepreneurs going in, and specifically entrepreneurs who are coming from communities that have been disproportionately impacted by
Yes.
cannabis.
Yes.
It's important that we are taking a real focus on getting this right. And part of that getting it right means, yes, I want states to do things like mass parties for cannabis collections. I want states to be able to focus on expansion. And I want states to be able to push to make sure that we can get federal common sense policy
Mm-hmm.
that can help and support the growth of industry and the growth of communities as well.
Oh, that's so awesome. This has been such a great conversation. I
Yes.
am so, so excited. When I came into the industry I won my license in 2016. I had no one to go to talk to about this. So yes, I have, how you said that my work is important. Thank you. Because sometimes it is difficult because I'm still in the fight. I'm still building my business. But I understand how important it is for me to go back and give back and kind of lay out what I did and share the knowledge that I've learned because I didn't have that. And I want to see more entrepreneurs like myself. All the people around me, my family, allowed me to stand on their shoulders so I could shine. And I want to be able to do the same for many other people. So, all of those that are watching that are interested in the industry, make sure you're following me. Follow my page, Legal and License. You can find it in my bio. That's where I share a lot of my tips, and I'll be starting a community there as well for those of you that want to get into the industry around the country, not just in Maryland, but here in Maryland, we are rocking and rolling, and we are progressive.
Come to
Come
Maryland.
on to Maryland, we
Come
are doing it here. We are doing it here. Thank you so much, Governor Moore. I really, really enjoyed
God
this.
bless you. God bless you, for real. God bless you and the family. And thank you to everybody. And keep following the work that Hope is doing. And keep following the work that Maryland is doing. It's
Yes.
Maryland time. And if you want to learn more, also go to governor.maryland.gov. And you can get all the information as well about the work that's happening. Governor.maryland.gov. Come through.
All right, guys. Thank you again, Governor.
Thank you. Thank you, Hope. Talk to you soon.